who I haven't met in person or online at some point in this weird COVID reality. My name's Sarah Ramsey. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the volunteer development manager on staff at the Mountaineers. And just want to thank you all for joining tonight to get ready for our upcoming or currently sort of starting ski season, and work with Denes tonight on a group facilitation training for our cross-country ski leaders. So Denes is a trainer with PSIA Northwest down in, are you in Portland, Denes?
I'm Portland area, yes.
Portland area in Oregon. And the Mountaineers is a member school of PSIA through both our Mini Lodge program and some of our cross-country ski programs. And so invited him in to facilitate this training and get our folks connecting and discussing about how we can improve our Nordic ski trips and programs, and get together at least virtually if we can't gather in person as we kick off the season. So we've got a pretty robust group of folks attending tonight. So instead of going, virtually around the room with introductions, would just invite folks to drop into the chat which branch you are with at the Mountaineers and what your role is supporting cross-country ski programs at the Mountaineers. I think we have folks from almost all of our branches that have programs represented, so it'll be great to introduce one another a little bit and know where everybody's coming from. And then just a bit of Zoom etiquette. I think we've all been on Zoom calls at some point along the way at this point, but if you're not talking, if you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute just to limit feedback, that's really helpful. And then up to you if you'd like to have video on or off. And Denes, I'll turn it over to you unless you need anything else from me.
Thank you, Sarah. So I haven't been around you guys. I was kind of a little bit lost on the topic, but with Sarah and a couple of questions, I started to understand what you're looking for. PSIA, we support ski instructors, mainly how to teach and what to teach. This, I think, involves a little bit of fitness testing, a little bit of what can I do on the fly to keep my groups together if they have technique or fitness deficiencies. So I'd like to keep this more as a chat and idea sharing and see what people are trying to get out of this, what if they can bring up real problems that they experienced, and we can all see if we can come up with solutions for that. And I have a couple ideas, just a couple screens to share with you that we use in PSIA as our guidelines on certain things. So with that in mind, I think we got 3 questions, right, Sarah? Could we go through the questions first and see if those people are here so we can start the discussion and kind of model what we're trying to do here?
Sure. Do you need me to pull those up, Denes? Do you have them?
I do not have them as nicely as you probably have them. Here we go. Do we have Bob? Is it Kiranen or Karanen?
Bob Karanen.
Karanen. Sorry, Bob, for butchering your name.
That's okay. I'm here.
You asked about injuries and falls, especially on icy surfaces or difficult conditions. Is that correct? Like, do I understand that?
Yes, you do. I just wanted some general guidelines or maybe some easier places to go cross-country skiing. We have here in Olympia a pretty beginners-oriented program. And I've noted in the last, I'm a climbing background, and I've noticed that we've actually had more injuries in our cross-country ski program than we have in our climbing program in the last few years. So just wondering some general ways of looking at injuries, especially in potentially icy situations. I think you were talking about some of that earlier before the actual program started.
Yeah, and I've had a conversation with Sarah about this, and I'm not sure if you're going to be happy with what my suggestion would be in this case, but I would avoid icy conditions. Our skis, especially cross-country skis, don't have metal edges, and that was the sort of gist of the conversation of the even metal edges is they're not sharp. They don't work that well on the ice. And we've had a Nordic instructor get hurt once at Meadows on just a sheet of ice, and he just got out there, stood up, the skis left him, and he broke his hip. There is not much we can do with ice but avoid it. And with beginners, their fear and the lack of coordination in their muscles, it creates just situations that are too dangerous, in my opinion, to bring people into. So it is an outdoor sport that we are at the mercy of the weather. Here on Mount Hood, I also work in the alpine side. There are days that our lifts shut down and they close the mountain because visibility, wind, there are just natural, weather things that just is not conductive to do this sport. So besides that, if you're already out there and you encounter hard conditions, walk like eggshells, walk like a penguin, keep your movements small, and keep your body relaxed. That's what helps me to navigate those kind of conditions. And that's what we had yesterday for our junior team training up at Teacup. And even my son who went to nationals last year, he was like, my skis were just all over the place. You couldn't do hard and powerful movements. So I would not advise that for beginners.
That's kind of what I expected the answer to be. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Let's look at the next one. That was... Okay.
Chris, you're
now,
on mute. Chris,
I was just going to add that even if the trails can be just about okay, the trailheads, the snow parks, can really be treacherous, and often skiers are not really concentrating that much there. So that can be a place to fall as well. And out on the trail, sometimes you don't know until you get to a part of the trail whether it's going to be doable or not. We have a snow park called Cabin Creek, and one of the best skis on a good day is to go up what's called a Mabilis. But if it's icy, it's really difficult even to climb up, and then it might ease during the day, but really treacherous to go down. So it would be a better choice at that point, as I've done with the group, to decide there are other trails in the area you can do. You don't necessarily have to do a Mabilis just because you posted it.
Thank you, Chris. And this is exactly what I'm envisioning it. We start talking about something, all of you with experience, please chime in as you feel appropriate to address the topic, because there's probably so much experience in the group that we can all learn from. Anybody else has anything to share on this? All right, I guess we can move on.
Well, I had a comment. If I had a group and it was really icy in the parking area, I would have everyone just carry their skis and walk carefully to where the track begins, or the trail, just to avoid, anybody losing control in an icy parking area. I think the best thing is just to walk over to where it's safer, you know, a little softer snow.
Thank you.
Not always safe even to walk across the parking lot.
Yeah, true.
Also, a lot of people forget about sidestepping on cross-country skis. It's still an okay activity. I see like a lot of time with beginner students in our lessons that they all try to get up or down a hill that they have just a horrible time. It's just too much for them. And the instructors are insisting to go down straight or come up straight. It's perfectly okay if the conditions call for it to use sidestepping on cross-country skis. That way you can keep your base of support more under your body. What we call base of support under center of, or center of mass over base of support. Yeah. Just throwing it out there. Sidestepping is sometimes the safest way to get through areas. All right. Do you want to take Chris' answer next? And I think Sarah has more authority on COVID questions that Chris was interested in.
Yeah, and Chris, you and I talked a little bit offline about wanting to kind of, my hope for this session, if there's a lot of interesting questions about how to run programs during the pandemic and with our COVID restrictions, we can maybe, my hope would be a little bit to save that towards the end of the conversation, and we can focus our time on this topic of group management and working with students and with participants while we have Denes. And then if there's, if we have time at the end and there's questions specifically about COVID guidance, I'm happy to answer those, or we can have a second conversation or some follow-up if folks have run into specific issues or they have questions about things that are specific, hopefully to just this winter, that we haven't dealt with in the past. So Chris, I don't know if you had anything else in your question that you wanted to mention that pertained more to the group dynamics, or if it was really, my recollection is it was really about the COVID related guidance, but I'll defer to you since it was your question.
Yeah, I guess it's in a way a bit of both. I've found with hiking anyway, with people putting on and off masks, depending on whether they were in close proximity to others, which sometimes you had to be, and not, that firstly, it was kind of hard to remember who everybody was, because instead of having, say, a group of 8, it was almost like having a group of 16 because they looked different in and out of masks. But the other thing, just being able to have a cohesive group while you're trying to distance is a little bit more difficult. And then masks are on and off is relatively easy when you're hiking, but if you think about when you're skiing and you've got gloves to take on and off, and you've got ski poles dangling around your wrists, just the mechanics of taking masks up and down is a lot more difficult. And I don't know yet how that's going to work. I don't think any of us do, because we haven't really been out there with a group yet, but it's just something maybe to bear in mind, and how you try and keep the group cohesive, but while at the same time keeping it somewhat separate.
Chris, I actually had that experience on Monday coming down Amabilis. I always pack my big puffy Rainier gloves to come down Amabilis, and I could not, for the life of me, the only place I could get my mask was in my mouth. There was no way for me with gloves on, any sort of puffy glove, to adjust a mask without taking them off. And so then my hands got very cold touching the wet mask. So I probably should have just worn not puffy mittens and just had some under gloves maybe.
It may not be so much a problem in the snow parks, but I don't know what it's like in your ski area, Denes, but I understand that, for example, at the summit at Snoqualmie, anybody that skis, whatever the skiing is, unless they're eating in the lodge, which I wouldn't recommend, they are supposed to wear a mask the whole time.
So most ski areas over here require have a mask when you are indoors all the time. There's no indoor eating in Oregon for the current time being. And outdoors, if you cannot maintain 6-foot distancing. And I brought up to Sarah earlier when we talked the US ski and snowboard guidance. They say for training purposes, you do not need the mask for high intensity activities, but you want to maintain 10-foot distancing, not 6-foot, but 10-foot. Our ski poles are pretty good distancing tools. So unless it's a mass start race, I don't see a lot of people crammed up on top of each other on the trail. And I think that's the benefit of our sport is you can be out in nature where it's safe. You're not locked into an indoor place. And I think it's pretty easy to maintain that distancing. Maybe you pay a little more attention to group spacing and just tell people like, hey, just leave another skier space in front of you. And at that point, I think you're safely within that 10-foot distance because your skis are about 6 foot, 7 foot, depending on what size you use. And 2 of those gets you over the 10 feet.
Okay.
So do you all try to get to know the names of your participants? Like,
yes,
you do?
It is a very important part of people's skills. And I think it helps create respect for you. And I also try to encourage the group to learn each other's names so everybody knows everybody. And I'm actually going to throw up a slide on people skills. So in PSIA, we think of our educational process as on 3 legs: people skills, teaching skills, and technical skills. None of those alone would make you a great teacher, great instructor. You can be the best skier if you don't care about people and you don't know how to transfer that information. Is not going to help you. It also doesn't help you to be a great person and a great teacher, but don't know how to ski, because then you can't get out on skis, and so on and so on. So all those 3 is important. And another thing that I was going to bring up along that line is something that we use with kids. We mandate instructors at Mount Hood Meadows, when they take kids lessons, is you have a sort of group sign out sheet where you put down what clothes they wear. So if you go on with a group of 8 and you are worried about losing them, either just mentally make a list of yellow jacket, brown pants, blue jacket, red pants, whatever, so you know what clothing, because you're not seeing their face, you're not seeing much of them, but we have helmet color, jacket color, pants color that the instructors have to put down on a piece of paper, or you guys can make your own card. And if you put down the clothing, if you ever lose somebody, that will come very handy for rescue or whatever, the search party of who you're looking for. That might be a helpful hint. You had the last question, and I don't want to butcher your name.
Actually, you started it in the European way, the Maud, but
Maud.
in country,
Okay.
the people usually say Maud.
I'm
That's
European
all good.
too, so. All right, and your question was most aligned with what I was expecting to talk about today. That was beginner tips on how to keep together a group of different abilities, issues that come up in the past with more experienced leaders and how they dealt with it. Golden tips for us beginners. I mean, we can spend the whole 90 minutes on that. So I think that's awesome. We will talk about how to evaluate technique or quickly try to bring some people up to speed with this sport, one thing that came into my mind about how to keep groups of different abilities together is, again, what we do in the junior program. Sometimes we run juniors and masters together here on Mount Hood in workouts or training days. And what we have the faster skiers do is, let's say they get to an intersection, if we're talking about the resort where there's a lot of intersections, or we say, you know, once you can't see the group, turn around, circle back, get behind the group, and then start passing them again. So they literally run laps around the group. With COVID, trail sizes creates extra passing. It's a call that you guys have to make this year. But every other year, that works magically, where you, as the instructor, stay with the group that is the slowest, and everybody else runs laps around you as you guys move around your trip. And that keeps everybody engaged. We can pair people up, or they can just select their pace, and everybody can do it on their own. If anybody has anything to add to this.
Do you ever give them little exercises to do for, you know, those fast ones, like go on one leg, or do this type, you know, this little exercise just to on their loop?
We do that a lot in teaching situations. So let's say I'm teaching a group of 6 and there's just these 2 teenage boys that are like killing it, and they are with their parents and grandparents. And so like the parents and the grandparents are just like falling and rolling around. I give extra stuff to do the teenage boys to like do. But if I'm out on a trip, I don't know if I would task them with extra stuff. In a learning situation, definitely. I'm still trying to grasp the amount of learning you guys do on these trips versus sightseeing and getting from point A to point B. So if the purpose is, okay, we're gonna go from the snow park 4 miles up and back, and in that 8 mile, I'm gonna make you a better skier, yes, I would challenge them with extra activity. If the goal of the trip is, you know, let's see the sunset or whatever, I would probably not.
That makes sense. That's fair enough.
Denes, there's a couple questions in the chat that I can read to you.
Okay, let me get to the bottom of the chat.
The recent one from Beverly is, what's your favorite way to teach someone to get back up after falling?
Very good question. This is something we teach in the first lesson, and I've just had a clinic to our beginner or our instructors of how to teach getting up after a fall. We all want to get their skis across the fall line. So if my hand is the top of the hill, my elbow is the bottom, I want my skis to face across the fall line with my body being on the top side towards my wrist and not underneath my skis. At that point, I'll have one leg lower on the hill, one leg higher on the hill. I would take my uphill leg and try to pull it back enough, because cross-country boots only attach at the front, so I can get on my toe. I would like to pull my foot under my hip, so I have a stable support. Actually, I want to pull my foot far back so my knee can be under my hip. I'm trying to like get into the position here. At that point, I have, let's say, I'm facing this way. Left foot is lower, right foot is higher. I'm on my left foot and my right knee. From that position, you can just pull the foot back under you and stand up very easily. We're not on the hill. You can try to imagine, or you can roll around in your living room, wherever you guys are, and figure that out. But if you're on your foot and on your knee, it's rather quick to stand up from there. And I think that's the part that a lot of people miss is I see a lot of people struggle getting up by trying to get up and let their feet scoot forward. That's where I see most problems or failures of getting up and falling backwards down. You want to pull a knee under you, the one that's higher up on the mountain. Unless you're on flat ground, then you can have either knee. Comments, questions, other great techniques?
So
Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so one of my favorite things to do personally is a lot of times I'm in loose snow, a lot of times I'm not on groomed trail. And so one of my favorite things is to take my backpack off and toss it on the snow so that I have something to push on for my hands. Also, so I'm a little bit lighter getting up. I just like to have something to put my hand on, so that my arm doesn't just go sinking right on down.
See, we never use backpacks in teaching situations. I make them drop everything, like, hey, we want to teach you and not carry extra weight. So I didn't even think about backpack. But a lot of time when we're talking about loose snow, you can also make a cross with your poles and grab it in the junction and put some weight on that. So that gives you a little extra flotation.
Right. Yeah, I know people who do that. I kind of like to have my pole handy for when I actually stand up.
If you have a knee under you with the foot, you will be able to stand up.
This is Matt Padnall in Everett. One thing about getting people up, I've seen this happen a lot. Someone falls down and they're your friend and you want to help them get up, which is not a good idea because invariably they can pull you down and you have two people on the ground. So the general rule is if they're down, you coach them to get up. And sometimes people are really stuck in the snow, but if they need help, you take your skis off and help them up. I just emphasize that with people because I learn from personal experience trying to pull them up when you're on skis doesn't work too well sometimes.
That's right. And also, if you're not in very deep snow and they have trouble getting up, it's okay to take their skis off. Like a lot of time, people just don't realize, oh, I can take a ski off? Sure. If you need to, you can take one or two off. So we got a new question that says, what is your favorite way to teach beginners how to stop? I like to use gravity to stop. And that's coming from my alpine side. But if I can turn going up the hill, I have something that's stopping me. Cross-country trails, it might not be as wide and available. We want to teach them how to snow plow with one ski out of the tracks or both skis out of the tracks and snow plow. Before I want to teach people to stop, if we're talking about very new people, I want them to be able to slide. And I know a lot of people's fear is, how do I stop? How do I not, just keep going down? But the good thing about cross country is if you go down, there's always an upright after it or a flat. So it's not like a downhill slope where you can go 2 miles down the hill. And I say that because if you want to be able to control where your skis are going or pointing, you have to be able to stand on top of your skis. And that's something we emphasize a lot in ski instruction, is you want to have your body over your base of support. You want to be able to stand on your foot. When you guys walk around, just walking, you know, on the planet regularly, everybody puts their foot under their body. Walking is basically a controlled forward falling that you catch yourself with your foot every time. Because you go on one foot and you tip forward and then the other foot is in front of you all the time. Cross-country skiing is not any different in concept. But what happens to people is they start shuffling on the snow. And if their body is my head, hopefully you'll see it on the screen, and you put your foot way out there, now you have to pull your whole body after your foot. And you're kind of playing catch up with your feet. And that's the same thing about going downhill, is you want to stay on top of your foot, then you can make the wedge, then you can control where you're going. If people skiing with their feet ahead of them, that's not going to work out great. They either can't keep up with the speed, or they just have no control over their skis and they're continuously falling. So back to the question. If I can have them stand over their feet, they can do the snow plow. And the wider you open the snow plow, the higher you make your edges, the quicker you're gonna stop. If you guys taking out a group and ask them, do you know how to stop? Maybe when you come to the first little hill, let them show you and you can evaluate their skills. If you feel like it needs to be addressed, you could take some time and bring people up to speed on their stopping and avoiding objects and people. I always tell people, you don't want to be in the same place at the same time with a different object when you are on skis. Just pick your own free space. Does that answer your question, Beth?
Yep. I'd also be interested in hearing how you model, or what words or cues you use to describe to people what they should be doing with their knees when they're plowing. Like, should they be bringing their knees in? Sometimes people say, imagine holding a ball between your knees. Just wondering what things you say.
I only talk about the knees if there's an absolute need for it. Again, the most problems that I see is people's knees are locked out and rigid. And that also creates that problem of pushing their feet away from themselves. It all comes back, keep your feet under you, keep your feet under you. If you ever come on a lesson with me, you'll hear me say that phrase probably 100 times in a 2-hour lesson. And so what I'm really concerned about when I take people downhill on cross-country skis or any kind of skis is maintain flexion in all body joints so they can control where their feet are. And if you start spreading your feet and at the same time pointing your toes in, I don't really care where your knees are. If you can't edge, I'll say, yeah, imagine squeezing something between your knees, and that could be you know, one of those rubber balls that the kids play, the whatever ball, but it's like a basketball size maybe, that I would try to squeeze between my knees. That might help some people. What we find helpful is talk about the tool performance. So if I want them to edge the skis, I show them that I want you to tip the ski on its side. If you spread your feet out just by basic anatomy, nobody's feet can be like far, far out and the ski still be flat. As your feet are spreading, the ski is gonna be getting on their edge. If I get too much into remote controlling their body, they might get more confused than if I ask them, put the skis on its side. We find that more successful most of the time. And if they are able to get the tool to where you want, like the skis on the edge, I would ask, what did you do? And if they can describe it, I'd say, keep doing that. Whatever clicks for you to make those movements, that's what I want to reinforce, because I don't know what's in their head, what they're making their body do to do that. But I can see on the skis, is that the result I want to see? All right. If I can share our technical model of skiing, what we do in PSIA, or how we look at the technical part of skiing, we could talk about that. So let me find the right screen that I want to share here. There we go. I don't know if any of you is familiar with this diagram here. We describe skiing as a continuous repetition of 3 phases or 3 skills. We have push off, weight transfer, and glide. So if I want to ski efficiently, if we're talking about classic diagonal striding, I want to stop one of my skis by engaging my wax pocket or grip or whatever way my ski grips, push off of that ski, transfer my weight to the other leg. Hopefully, I'm going to land on that leg with a flexing joint pattern, so I don't lock everything out. But as I land, I keep everything flexing, so I can create some glide on that leg. And then repeat. And that's called cross-country skiing. What you need for that to work, on the basic level, you have to be in an athletic body position. Flexed ankles, knees, and hips. Those are the joints we don't want to lock out. Neutral back and relaxed shoulders. Center of mass over feet, which I call, plain language-wise, body over feet. Again, if you guys out with a group and you look at people struggling with their technique, their skis either not gripping and they just kind of slipping back. It could be wax, I understand that. But if they have patterns or skins, whatever that should work in those conditions, then it's a technique. The first thing we would look at is their body position. Where are they in relation to their feet? How are their joints? Are they stacked? That's my first go-to, is their body position something that would help them make the movements. If everything is in place, then I look at their body movements, which could be rotation, flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, inversion, eversion. There's a lot of words there, but there's all the things the legs can do. Are they making the right body movements? When I'm trying to get grip on my classic skis, if this is my foot, this is my ski here, I do have to have a downward movement that I want to push the grip into the snow. Are they making that movement? If everything is there, I look at the timing. If I'm engaging my grip pocket, then my body passes over. Let's see, how can I see it on the screen? So I'm engaging my grip, but my body passes. There's going to be a point where it's too late for the grip anymore, and it'll just slip out. So is the timing correct? And I don't think you guys need to worry about power. That's the last part of the picture, but that's just how much power you can put out, the force, the speed. It's more about performance than can we get through this. So the three things that could be off and they struggle is the body position, the body movements, and the timing. All of those can be looked at each phase. You can look at push off. You can look at their weight transfer. And a lot of time with beginners, they will struggle with weight transfer. They'll get the kick, but instead of completely going to the other foot, they kind of just shuffle. So they always two-footed. That could also be, are they pushing their feet ahead so they can't have their center of mass over their feet for the weight transfer to occur? Is it body movements? Are they not moving forward? They're not flexing that leg that they're landing on enough? Or is it timing? They get off one leg, but the other leg is like already down or something. Okay, it's really difficult on Zoom. Now I realize to try to paint the picture in your head what I'm trying to show. It's so easy when I'm out on snow and I'll just tell people like, this is, you know, what you see. Before I ramble on any further, do we have any questions? Do I need to clear up anything? I think Beverly, you might try to say something, but it seems like you're on mute.
No, I didn't have a question. I was just saying, no, I don't have a question.
I just saw the lips move and didn't hear anything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Anybody else have any questions about technical aspects of actual cross-country skiing?
I have a question or comment. How much do you find with certain skiers, maybe, I don't know if you teach seniors, Denes, that a problem can be that people don't have very good balance sometimes, and without being able to fully commit to one foot or the other, which is really a balance exercise. You think about seniors, when they walk, they tend to shuffle more, but without that weight transfer being effective, you're not going to get a good push off. And I sometimes wonder if it would be good if you could get some of our skiers to one side before you even get out on the snow, perhaps in the parking lot, and just do a little bit of balance exercise to see what you contend with. I do believe you can help people improve their balance, but you know, when you get out on the ski slope, you've got to start where people are at. And I think that balance is something that often is not really looked at closely enough. Do you agree?
I agree with you on a lot of what you said. I do work with seniors. PSIA does have specialists for seniors. I'm trying to actually bring in senior specialists into cross country in the Northwest. I have the Alpine certification to work with seniors. PSIA decided that balance is the result of applying these skills rather than a separate skill. That's more like an outcome. So if you look at body position, again, if you can keep your body over your feet and you're standing on that foot, you should be in balance at that point. Where I find seniors struggle is, one, their joints might be stiffer and their perception of where they are in space or where their kinesthetic feedback is getting slower than younger people. So it might take them a while to find that. We do have a 84, 88 years old, I don't remember exactly how far past 80 he's now, skier out at Mount Hood Meadows that comes up every day that we are open. And watching him gives me a lot of ideas of what seniors are still capable. And he definitely has the experience. He was coaching and teaching skiers in his younger age. But he's able to do a lot, and he has certain health issues and whatever that limits him, but he's still able to accomplish a lot and glide if he can get his body over his feet. And so practicing balance out of the slippery feet is a good idea. If you guys have time and want to improve skills, it's always good to practice things without skis on, then with skis on stationary, and then start moving on skis. So those exercises could build on each other. If you do the same movements in those 3 steps, people gradually will understand what they have to move in their body to accomplish that. Can we move on? I'll take it as a yes. So going into more concrete examples, as I'm out with people diagonal striding, what I find is beginners don't transfer their weight very efficiently. They will put their leg that they sort of swinging forward down behind the leg they standing on, the one they kicking off of. And that will limit how much weight transfer or glide they can accomplish. You'll hear them slap their tails because they hurry to get the other foot down. They're not comfortable on one foot at a time. And it's just like walking. Skiing is done one foot at a time. You can practice certain things with people. I would always tell people, as we move along the tracks, we're trying to keep our feet under us and let our body travel together with the ski. There are many drills that we do, again, in a teaching setting. I don't know how much of that can be done in a touring setting, but if you can increase someone's ability to get their foot next to the other foot or even ahead of it, as this is my kicking foot, so I get my kick or grip engaged, the other foot, how would I say it? You could do a drill where they can put the foot down behind that foot a couple steps, then try to put it next to it, do a couple steps that way, and then see if even they can put it ahead. And at that point, they have to transfer the weight to that foot that's ahead. It should show people that that's the more efficient way of getting down the trail.
I have a question. Can you hear
Go
me?
ahead. Yes.
You mentioned in this last segment the slapping ski. I'm familiar with that slapping ski. And would you talk about the remedy again?
Most often it happens because people are uncomfortable keeping one foot up in the air and they hurry back down to the ground. So if I go back to the pyramid here, do you guys see when I'm circling the little pointer around things on the screen? I see it on my screen. I don't know if it goes through and you guys see it on the other end. Thank you for the feedback. First, I would look at their body position. Are they sitting back? Do you guys use that term? We use it in teaching a lot, meaning their feet are ahead of them, their body is behind their feet. We call it sitting back. The remedy is try to keep your body over your foot. If you can do that, you can stand on that one foot. Now you have time to put the other foot down further ahead. If one foot is up here, but my body, this is my foot, this is my body. If it's behind it, imagine how that's just going to pull you down, right? Behind your foot. If your foot can be under your body, now you don't have to hold yourself up. If you guys just stand up and try to put one foot out ahead of you, you can't stand on that foot if it's ahead of you. The other foot immediately falls back down to the ground. But now you take your hip, you can't see the whole thing. I don't know how much you can see of me. Nope, it doesn't work. So as long as my hip is over my foot, this other foot is up in the air and I can balance easily. So it's a lot about body positioning. And as an instructor or guide, you can see that the best from a side view. So if this is their body, my hand and the 2 feet, it's here, it will always fall back and slap. If they can be over with joints bent, now that other foot have time and options to not just fall down.
And I've had the best luck with getting people in the right position by telling them just to bend their ankles. Like if I tell my friend to bend her knees, then sometimes people will take that as like they can still be kind of sitting back. But if you tell people to bend their ankles, it puts them forward a little bit.
If that works for you, great. Again, a lot of time when you tell people bend their ankle, they look at you funny, like, what do you mean? And whatever achieves getting their body over their feet. For me, what I make them do at the very beginning is I'll make them stand, jump, and land. And then I make them land very quietly. And if they can do that, they're staying over their feet. What I find in my teachings is trying to explain people what to bend and what to straighten or tighten or anything doesn't work as good as if I can ask them to do something and that puts them in the position. Have you guys ever fought a bear? Probably not. But can you imagine how you would stand if you're trying to fight a bear? I think everybody can imagine, right? What stand they would be in. Is your ankle bent at that point? I'm pretty sure it is.
I'm running.
So your ankle is really bent. But if you can think of any activity, you know, that another good one that I use in alpine skiing a lot is imagine you lifting up a heavy wheelbarrow. You reach down, you grab the handles, and then now you're trying to lift it up. That puts you in a position where your weight is sort of slightly biased forward because you're trying to lean into that lift. That puts you into that awesome stance, the good athletic body position. Again, this is a group discussion. If anybody has any kind of tricks, how to make them people, how to like help people find their most efficient position, chime in, throw it out there. So my point was, I find it more successful if I don't bug down on certain joints and telling them what to do with it, but give them an experience that puts them in that position. All right. Not all talk at once, guys. It's just so loud in here. Do we have anything in the chat? Because I don't see the chat. Where is the chat?
Chris had mentioned that being ready to receive a tennis serve is another example he's used as somebody to be in a ready
tennis. Yeah. Yeah, or shooting a free throw in basketball. That sort of like helps me segment into the other skill, the people skills. So I'm going to share another screen here. It'll be this one. Stop share. Do you guys see the people skill now, or are we still on the other one?
You see the people skill.
Okay. So people skills are the ability to gather information from self, others, group, environment, circumstance, and use that information to adapt and build trust. When would you use the tennis example that Sarah just threw in there? If I know that they play tennis. So that's a good way to get to know people, is just have a conversation with them. What else they do besides signing up for your trip? And gather as much information as you can from the group, and that way you know what resonates with them. what examples, what activities you can reference where they can build that connection that like, oh, so what I do there applies to skiing. Just like in the technical skills, there is some fundamentals that we teach people in people skills, which are develop relationships based on trust, engage in meaningful two-way communication, identify, understand, and manage your emotions and actions, recognize and influence the behaviors, motivations, and emotions of others. The first one has a very well-worn saying in teaching circles is people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So if you're leading a group, if you want them to trust you, they have to understand that you care about them. And then they'll be more receptive to anything you're trying to accomplish with them. So building that trust, it starts maybe as early as signups. If people call and ask information or email you, how you respond to them, just by them knowing that you care will build that trust that you can leverage while you're out there on the trip, and they will listen to you because they trust you. Without the trust, it's really hard to get people to listen to you and follow you. The second part is the meaningful two-way communication. I can yap all I want at you guys today. If it doesn't mean anything to you, and a couple of you asked questions, responded to my talk here, that lets me know what you are getting from what I'm saying. So when you talk to somebody, you also have to listen, and you can look at their, not much of facial expressions with COVID face masks, but body language. Sometimes people might not tell you that they are tired, but if you looked at them at the beginning of the trip and they were kind of springy and good balance, good glide, something, and it's all breaking down, you would probably interpret that this person is struggling or getting tired. So it involves verbal and nonverbal communication. Also, how you look at people. If you ignore them, that's also part of that trust and communication. So it's a very important part, and you can learn a lot by listening. You will not learn anything from them by you talking. That's what I would like to emphasize. The next part is what you bringing into that relationship. You have to know your strengths. You have to know yourself, how you click, what worries you, how you like to control things, and understand yourself and organize your actions and thoughts based on what your strengths are and what you bring into that group setting. A lot of time, something doesn't work, you struggle keeping the group together, or people slip on icy conditions. You can take some time after, try to analyze what could you have done? What was in your control and what was outside of your control? What was outside of your control? How you can, approach that in the future. But you can learn a lot by analyzing your own actions and be a better leader for the next time around. And the last part is understand how you affect people, because there is your intention of what you're trying to convey. What would you like the outcome of your communication, your interaction to be? But the impact on people might be different. The intention and the impact is two different things. You have to be able to recognize and evaluate that. I wanted to do this, this what happened. Where was the disconnect? Or I wanted to do this and this happened, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. So what did I do well? What can I improve on in the future? You also have to, when you're in a group setting, understand how the people interact with each other. And that goes back to the very beginning. Do you try to learn their name? Do you try to let them interact also? If you are out on a long trip, 8, 10, 12 miles, people will probably bond and help you keep the group together. They'll look out for each other. If you're in the middle of the group and somebody has trouble dropping off in the back, if there's good group dynamics in the group, the person right in front of them will kind of pass the message up like, hey, we have Joe struggling in there in the back. Let's all wait. It's up to you to manage the group dynamics. You have to be able to read the group, and you have to have the skills to manage that group dynamic. And you can practice that. Now, all chime in and let me know what you think about this. Who has any experience that want to share on this?
Could I just add to that in my experience, it's not something that you can do totally in one trip. What I try and do is to start to build a relationship up and encourage people to come back again and communicate with them between the trips, let them know when I'm going to lead another one, and hoping that by forming that sort of relationship that you're going to build trust over time by really people experiencing how you work with them and how you've dealt with things that have come up and how you've involved them and consulted them and given them responsibilities in the group.
Yes, over time, definitely, you have more effect on it. I would still challenge you to try and build up trust as much as you can from the first interaction you have with them by treating them, showering them with attention helps people feel important. I introduce humor. I self-depreciate myself and certain things that kind of works for me in group settings where I kind of build a safe but relaxing atmosphere, and that helped build trust even in a 1-hour lesson. And sure, I can up that as we go on. And I really appreciate your involvement, Chris. I think you're gonna get the award for most involved. What do you guys do to build trust in your group? Or do you just say, line up here, you first, you second, you third, now let's go follow me?
This is Matt Vadnal. My experience with people who are learning to ski is they're kind of fearful of failing. You have to tell them, there's no failing out here. To fall down a few times is not failure. And just keep at it and be persistent, and you will improve. And you've seen people I remember people on the verge of tears if they're having a really bad day. And at that point, you stop and take a break and encourage them to go on if they want to.
That's a great point. And I totally agree with you that there's two big fears in skiing. One is physically getting hurt. Two is just failing. And in front of your peers, it is a lot harder to try to like cope with failing, that you didn't learn something if you're trying to learn it, or you couldn't keep up with the group. A lot of the time, the person that's in the back is adding extra pressure to himself or herself by saying, oh, I'm holding up the group. Why did I sign up for this? They're starting to have doubts that will negatively affect their performance. So as a leader, it's your job to even emotionally support them and pick them up, which again will help you build trust with them. But you also need to manage the group that they are accepting of that person, and that will also help that person's fear of failing. The actual physical failing and falling part, I always tell people, everybody falls on skis. There's not one person that I know that never fell. And I fall all the time. And sometimes I just, out of silliness, go down the hill and fell and just say, see, I just fell. So it goes a long way by putting people at ease and letting them know it's okay to fail at a certain point. And part of this, what we do, you're not going to be a failure as a whole. There's still going to be many successes that will overcome a couple of failures that we have along the way.
Speaking of falling, do you have a favorite way to teach people how to fall?
I like to fall being small. If I'm big and rigid, I get hurt more and I fall bigger. Does that make sense? So if I'm about to fall, I want to ball up. Get as small as you can when you fall. You're protecting your extremities. The most common injury, who can take a whack at this? What is the most common injury in cross-country skiing?
I run into people who've twisted their knee.
Thumb.
Oh, the thumb?
Yes, because you fall on your pole and it dislocates or injures this tendon that holds your thumb together with the rest of your hand.
I have one of those thumbs, actually.
People try to catch their fall. If you can get small, your shoulders, your hips are either muscular or padded that can take the impact. Your fingers are a lot more fragile. Your knee, your ankle is a lot more fragile than your shoulder and hip. I do not advise falling hard on your hip on ice, but I think it's still a bigger area than your hands to fall, you know? So you want to hit with as much area of your body as possible. By being small, you have the highest chance of dissipating that impact on a larger area.
I mean, I usually end up telling people, if you know you have to bail out, like if you think you're going too fast and you know you're going to have to fall, to, like sometimes you just can't stop and you're like headed for a tree or something. I just tell people just plant your butt, miss your skis, go off to the side, but try to fall on your butt and try to miss your ski.
You realize that in cross-country skiing, you can call track. I don't know if trees know that, but at least people do. And they should get out of your way. That was the point.
Oh, the tree?
If they know the etiquette, right? If they're nice trees.
Yeah, Yeah, they're just not that nice.
Yes. So the most often seen reason of people like crashing and falling is their body gets stiff. They push their feet away, push their feet down ahead of them in the slope. So if you can get them to flex their joints, they on their way to getting small anyway, and that might help recenter them where they don't fall. So my best advice to people where they get rigid and they starting to like lose control is to relax. I tell people that like, if you drive a car with no shock absorbers, you're gonna ride like this. Same thing, like there is mountain biking that a lot of people are familiar with. There's just the, you know, hardtail bikes and no suspension front fork, or a bike with a suspension. When the suspension is working, you can go over more obstacles rather than a rigid bike. That's the same thing with skiing, but your legs are your suspension. You gotta have your suspension working. You can't be rigid. It has to be able to do this. So a lot of time when I'm working with beginners and we're on a gentle slope, I make them go down by keep flexing and extending their leg. Not fully extended, but feel the shock absorbers. Feel the shock absorbers. That's very helpful for me to teach them. You don't want to lock your legs out to be rigid, because that's where you're going to fall. Anybody has anything else to share?
Hey, this is Matt Fadnell again. One thing, we're talking about injuries. The injuries I remember the most was a broken wrist and a dislocated shoulder. It was caused by novice people going down a hill too fast and somehow getting the basket of their ski pole stuck somewhere. You know, they resulted in them, you know, a broken wrist or a dislocated shoulder. So to this day, when we're practicing downhill, especially long downhills, I make people take their wrist strap off. I mean, I know that is not, you really want to have your pole, you know, strapped to your hand to do the most efficient skiing, like when you're diagonal striding. But that is something that I've done since I had those experiences. And I can see why the thumb is injured, because, you know, that gets between you when you're falling and you have your wrist strap on, your thumb may get stuck there. But that's some practice I've used for the longest time now. So
yeah, I actually ski a lot with my straps off because I'm worried about the very same thing of having my pole get stuck and yank my shoulder out.
Well, I say it's downhill because conversely, if your strap is not tight over your wrist, you can't ski efficiently, because I see people just, you know, they got a death grip on their pole all day long and their hands get tired. And when you're diagonally striding properly, you're actually releasing the pole at the point you're going forward. So, you know, there's like a tension there. But certainly when we're going downhill, you know, long distance downhills, the poles come off, the wrist straps come off. I tell them to do that, or I give them the option. I just tell them this may happen, but you know, they make their own decision. So
that's a great point, Matt, and I totally agree with you on things. In the alpine world, when we skiing trees, we do take the pole straps off. We tell people, you know, take your strap off, because if a branch or a tree catches your pole, it's going to be your shoulder. So you'd better lose your pole than your shoulder. The other benefit I see on what you guys doing is when you're going downhill and you don't have your pole straps, you can't use your poles as your support tool or crutch as much because your hand would slip on the pole. So it teaches you even better skills and balance because you can't rely on the poles to kind of like hold you up. And I see how people stabbing forward, which brings a point that I always tell people, you never want, I was looking for a ski pole, but anyway, if this is my tip and this is my handle, you never want your tip to be ahead of your handle, because if that gets in the snow and you keep going, it's going to break your nose or take your eyes or teeth out. But a lot of people try to use those as braking devices. And if the straps are not on, they can't rely on it that much. So that's an added benefit, in my opinion, of your approach. All right, let's just tip our toes for a few minutes into our teaching learning cycle that we guide students through as instructors. In a lesson setting, we meet the people, we welcome them and do the introduction. Then we'll assess students. This involves just talking to them, you know, hey, what do you do? Why did you sign up? What other activities do you do? You bike, okay, you're on a club, you do on 6-hour rides, and then you ride 4 days a week. I know they physically fit, so if they're struggling, it will be a technique issue, right? So you can learn a lot by just first talking to people, establishing that connection, establishing that trust, but you also gathering information that you can use on your trip or on your lessons. Also, as soon as you start walking around the parking lot and you see some seniors just walking very rigidly or not in balance, you know, once they put the slippery feet on, you're gonna have a lot harder job to do. And then when you put skis on, so the assess part is what I call is inside the washing machine. And in this cycle, you continually assess your students once you get into this. But in the beginning, as they put on skis, how they standing up with the skis on, how they start gliding, it always gives you an idea of how do you want to determine goals and plan experiences. So again, in your case, okay, well, we were talking about going 4 miles an hour, we'll probably have to go 2 miles an hour. Or, you know, I was expecting all abilities, but these guys look great. So maybe we can up the pace. Create experiences for learning. This is a fancy way to say, do exercises, do drills, which if I'm trying to teach, you know, let's say how to go downhill, doing the shock absorbers would be one of those experiences for learning that helps them understand how to keep their feet under them and how keep their body soft so they don't lock out, don't push the skis away from them down the hill. And then for us, guided practice means we'll ski and we'll see how these exercises that we've done, these experiences, changed their skiing. And then we'll like assess that, and then we'll plan something else for them to do, and then keep going at it until we finish with the lesson. But that's just in my head is a good guide of how I approach most situations as a teacher. So chime in with questions, ideas, experiences that you have in this realm. All right, then we'll open it up for free for all. Do we have any more questions in the chat? Anybody has any other ideas they want to share or solicit? There's a lot of great comments now that I'm reading the comments here in the chat section. You guys like to use your keypad more to communicate than your voice, I see. I've been like staring at my screen share and I haven't read these comments, but there's a lot of good information in there that you try to hide from me.
So I know, Chris, you're having like co-leaders on some of the trips, and that's partly how you deal with having people who are much slower than other people, correct?
Well, that's one of the reasons for it. The other is to help to bring on new leaders, because I realize that at my age and everything, I'm not going to go on forever. And it seems even in these difficult circumstances, we've got many more people wanting to go on trips than we have leaders. And so co-leading is a way to help bring on people in maybe in some of the situations that people are here tonight, in addition to their single mentored trip, so that they share the experience. And yes, it certainly does help out on the trail, particularly when something happens, to have somebody else that you can really rely on to help share the responsibility in the decision making.
So since I haven't done this before, is it common to have two people leading the trip or co-leading the trip, or is that usually, do you usually end up with like 6 or 8 people and you're the only leader?
Can I put something in here? Chris and I usually co-lead many trips together, and we have different paces, and it's you always get a mind-boggling array of skiers. No matter what you say the trip is, you get skiers on both ends, and it is handy, especially in the days we were doing 12 skiers, to have 2 different ski leaders because of the paces. And I know when I take a ski trip, and I haven't led that many, but I want them to be my pace, because I want to ski too, and I'm not teaching, I'm just taking a trip out.
Right. And so what do you do if you have somebody show up for a trip that has hills and they're like a total beginner and they're like falling down continuously and can hardly go anywhere?
Well,
what do you end up doing?
I only had one experience with that last year. Eric was on it. So I had the fastest skier in Seattle and I had the slowest. So then I've driven from Tacoma. And so my ski trip, then I don't really have a ski trip. That's what happens. So now
you end up staying with the slow person.
To a large degree, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It would generally make sense that unfortunately the slowest person dominates the required pace, because the faster people can slow down or circle around the group, but there's not much you can do with the slowest person. So.
Denes,
I like your idea, Denes, of having the faster one ski in front and then behind. It can't be done in every case. Some of our trails are one way only, but in many circumstances that can work, and then also keeps people warm. And I've done that as well by having a combination of classic skiers and skate skiers, because obviously the skate skiers are going to go faster, although the problem then in some cases is the stamina runs out. So you have to be aware of that as well.
You bring up a good point though, because I tend to get very cold when I have to, be with the slower person. So I like the idea of appointing a sweep and having that a rolling function, maybe in a group as you know, if the dynamics are good for that.
And I think most people like to be empowered. So if they have a specific job in the group, that already makes them feel more part of the group and more important, more appreciated, and that could be to your benefit. Another comment that I sort of thought of is in lessons, we find that about one instructor to every 5-6 students is somewhat ideal. I mean, the one-on-one is the best. But if we have to have groups, once you go past that 6, 8, you go into like 10, 12 and more, it is really difficult for each individual to get anything out of that. So if you guys organizing trips, especially with COVID, in Oregon, we have a limit of 6 on group sizes. So 1 leader, 5 participants, or 5-6 participants for every leader. I think it's a really like good magic number. And if you can manage to put, you know, co-leaders and 2 leaders in a group, if it grows into 10, 12, that would be, in my opinion, a good idea to kind of aim for.
Dennis, I'm looking at the time and we're just a little bit past 8. So I want to be kind of mindful of the time frame that we set out for the group and of your time. And maybe offer to the group if after there's been I'm responding in the chat to a question about COVID groups for the Mountaineers. But I'll offer that I can hang on after the call if there's anyone that has questions about COVID for Mountaineers operations. But just wanted to chime in with the time check.
Just one more thing about like the before the trip, evaluating the group and everything. It's much easier if they have some Nordic experience and they can tell you what kind of skiing they do or how much they can ski. If they can glide or they just kind of shuffling on their skis, that could give you ideas. But if people haven't done Nordic skiing, I would always tell them, this is a whole body experience. You're using almost every single muscle in your body, and it chews up the oxygen very quickly in your body. So if there's a fit runner, a fit swimmer, or a fit cyclist, and they've never been on cross-country skis, we can tire them out very quickly in 30 minutes. So just because they fit, they have to understand this is a different exercise.
That's what we love about it, right?
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you for your attention and your participation. Hopefully you find it helpful. And if you have questions or you want to address something specific, I think you could reach out to Sarah and she'll forward me the questions and we can sort of address it.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you all for joining tonight. And as